Third indifference curve video where we are going to look at how we can use the tool of indifference curve to represent tastes and preferences of consumers. Let's consider the first scenario where we are going to compare preferences between consumers who have different tastes for the same goods. So let's consider Tom and Jerry, and the goods that they are consuming are fish and cheese. Note that their indifference curves for the same goods look very different, which means that their tastes and preferences towards these goods are also different. First, let us look at Tom. As you will see that the indifference curves are quite flat compared to Jerry. Note that we are measuring fish on the vertical axis and cheese on the horizontal axis. So these would be quantities of fish and cheese for each consumer. So for Tom, let's look at the slope. So the slope of the indifference curve we know is known as the marginal rate of substitution. So MRS, and that would be for the way we write it is we write the good that is on the horizontal axis, so cheese for fish, which is basically if you increase the consumption of cheese by 1 unit, how much of fish are you willing to give up? So this would be for Tom. So let's say Tom. Okay. Similarly, for Jerry, we can write down the same expression, MRSC for F, or Jerry's slope of Jerry's indifference curve has the same definition, how much fish Jerry is willing to give up for 1 unit of extra unit of cheese. So that would be Jerry. Okay, so now let's compare the two slopes. So as you can see for Tom, if you give him, so let's say he had 2 units of cheese here, if you increase that to 3, so increase by 1 unit, he's only willing to give up a little bit of fish. Same here. So let's say he has 4, if you want to give him 1 more, he's not willing to give up any fish at all pretty much on this part of the indifference curve U0. Jerry, on the other hand, is willing to give up a lot of fish for 1 unit of cheese. So if you increase his cheese consumption from 1 to 2, he is willing to give up a lot of fish, and Tom is not willing to give up much fish at all. So we can say that this MRS for Tom is less, so the slope is less, so the amount of fish he is willing to give up is much less than Jerry. So when you see indifference curves like that, you can conclude about which consumer has a stronger preference for which of the goods that we are measuring on the graph. Moving on to number 2, the special cases of perfect substitutes and perfect complements. So first, let us look at perfect substitutes. What would be an example of perfect substitutes? I might consider a blue pen and a black pen. I don't care with what color I write, so these could be perfect substitutes for me. So how would the indifference curves look like for blue pen and black pen? So let's say I measure blue on this axis and black on this axis. Okay, if these are perfect substitutes, then the indifference curves are going to look like straight lines, which means that the rate of substitution or MRS between these two goods is equal to 1. So MRS blue pen versus red pen, X for Y, should be equal to 1. So the slope of the indifference curve would be 1. So these would be perfect substitutes. If, on the other hand, I wanted to plot the indifference curves for perfect complements, what would be perfect complements? Examples, you could say left shoe and right shoe. So perfect complements examples would be left shoe and right shoe, which means you always want to have them together, consume them together. If I give you one more piece of left shoe without giving you the right shoe, then there is no change in your utility or satisfaction. The indifference curves for these are L-shaped. So for perfect complements, the indifference curves are L-shaped. And the quantity of these goods are this, so 1 and 1 or 2 and 2. So you can see now how you can use indifference curves. You can give it different shapes, different slopes to represent preferences for different goods. You can also define what the nature of those goods are, and that also depends on how the consumer views these goods.